Welcome to Snowpal Podcast. Our guest today is Sharmeen Aqeel. Sharmeen is the founder of Libora, a lending platform for medical spas and aesthetic clinics. She helps owners secure fast, fair capital by translating their business performance into lender-ready terms. So, Sharmeen, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chris. It's my pleasure to be in your podcast today.
No worries. Happy to have a conversation here. Could you? I know I gave a brief intro there, but if you could just introduce yourself, like what you do and what your company does to the audience, and then we can jump into the topic.
Yeah, Chris, first of all, you did a brilliant introduction because in few words you said what I do. But let me elaborate a little bit more. I was basically a product designer. Then last year, I quit my job and started this company, a lending platform for healthcare businesses. So far, we are focusing on med spa. We are funding clinics from 50,000 to $2 million, and we have partners across Canada and across United States.
Thank you for that. So we will get into the topic, but before I do that, I always give the guests an opportunity to talk a little bit more if you wanted to share. So I'm going to do a screen share here, right? Let me make sure I got the right company, right? So this is your company. So let me, and we don't know each other. We'll learn about each other during the course of this conversation. That's typically how it happens on our podcast. So it's a lending platform built for clinics, right? So I'm going to just make a big assumption here and correct me if I'm wrong. Is the expectation that your customers hop on your platform to raise money for whatever it is that they're doing in the space of healthcare? Is that the basic premise?
That's the basic premise. And I believe the biggest value that we are providing is that whenever any clinic is looking for funding, they don't need to apply into multiple lenders. They apply once at Livora, and we will match them with the multiple lenders and give them the best offer.
Okay, that is good. I think now I'm going to stop sharing that. Having said that, okay, perfect. Right. So people essentially are looking for what do your customers typically do? I mean, they are raising money for what? Are they building software or what is it that they are raising money for?
That's a very good question, and it's also the sometimes they. I'm also teaching them why do you need money. So, giving you a recent example, one clinic contacted me because she had a slow growth and she was unable to pay the salaries of their employees next month. So, she was looking for working capital, but she does not know that she was looking for the working capital. So, that is a typical example of whenever you start a clinic, well, it's not about only clinic, it's also nearly all businesses. It takes time to pick up and goes to a point when you become profitable. Until then, you have to control how you're gonna pay the salaries, control your fixed costs, variable cost, etc. So this typical example, the clinic owner, she did not have enough capital to cover up the salary for next 2 months. So we matched her with our lenders as she had already been more than 6 months in business and she had stable revenues. So this is not a P&L statement, these are revenues. She applied for a loan as a working capital and we provided her working capital that she reimbursed in 6 to 8 months.
Okay, that's good to know. So, this is a topic that's new enough to me. So, I'm going to ask some basic questions. Excuse my ignorance here. So, when you say these medical clinics, are these like doctors' offices?
Yes, these are doctor offices, but the majority of our clients are coming from aesthetic clinics, med spas.
Oh, so med spas. Okay. So this is like, I'm going to trivialize this just for my understanding. So, somebody is opening a spa. Do they come to you or try to raise money before they've opened the spa? Because in your example, they already have one, but they were not able to pay. They needed the money and they raised this capital. Is it both ends of the spectrum? How does it typically work?
So it does work when you already have a clinic. So what we try to communicate through our website and other platforms is you must have a running clinic. It doesn't has to be a 2 year established clinic, but the lenders we work for, the number one advantage working with them is that they don't ask for collateral. Your business health is your collateral. So if anyone is coming without a business and just starting out, it means that they have to put their personal assets in term on collateral. And my lenders, they don't prefer that. So how it
Okay.
works is that we accommodate business who are at least 6 months in business and beyond.
I think that answers my question. Great. So, and these are businesses based in Canada, right? Only exclusively in Canada.
No, also in US. So our partners, thanks to the partnership between US and Canada, our partners are in US and in Canada as well.
Okay, cool. So North America, essentially, right? At least two of the countries in North America. That's good to know. So the few other basic questions before we jump into the core of our topic here is. So you said it's med clinics. People are raising money. It's typically they need to be in business for 6 months or so. It's in US and Canada, and you're helping them raise. The very basic question I have, Sharmeen, is why focus on a vertical that's med clinics? Why not have a platform? I have a couple of questions, but the first one is the very basic one, which is why focus on med clinics? Is it something like you have a background in the space and you want to take that learning to your business, or was it just that you found a void that could be filled in the space of med cleaning?
That's a very interesting question. So I have a personal story. I really liked the massages that I used to work with. She had been my massages for last 2 years, and she wanted to expand her business. And she was, while we were speaking, she was telling me that how hard it is for her to get loans for an existing business. So she already put her house in collateral to convince the bank that she is eligible to get loan. But the problem was that she was hoping to open the clinic, the extension of her clinic in 2 months, but she had to wait at least 5 to 6 months to get everything sorted out. And this is where I saw that there is a problem, that she has a running clinic, it's growing, but why we are taking so much time to release the funds? And then this is where I started getting more, doing more and more interviews. The same thing happened with the med spa, that the med spa was going good. She had a fully booked appointment for next 3 months, but she wanted to buy new equipment. And again, the release of fund through the bank was extremely delayed, that she might have lost her client if she did not get a funding.
Okay. So two things, right? One thing that's good to know is this is not a manufactured problem, because sometimes when you start a business, there's multiple ways of starting businesses, right? And one way is you decide to start a business, and then you look for a problem to solve, right? That's one way to do it. May or may not be the best way to do it, but there is a way to do it. But the better way to do it, in my opinion, is like something like what you share with us here, which is you've run into a problem and you're like looking for a solution. If there is not a solution, you're like, why don't I be the provider of that solution, right?
Yeah,
That's
and
one.
yeah, and Krish, just I want to continue to your point. I had been a user experience designer for more than a decade. And the first thing we do is to see what is the problem we are looking to solve. And so this is one thing that I would say I learned from my heart, from my profession, is starting with the problem. It was difficult because my initial few months was nothing but interviews, understanding why you're not getting loans, what's in coming in between. So yeah, I also believe that I haven't tried the other way, starting a business without a problem, but I believe that I'm at the right.
I think, yeah, absolutely right. But let me get to but two questions there. One is why med spas? You saw a problem, you want to build a product, you want to address something. What made you decide or focus on a vertical as opposed to building something that solves world hunger? You want to appease the appetite of a group of people, which is, I think, a good way to go about it. But I'm just curious to know why med spas and not a platform that's generic and outside med spas, meaning a horizontal platform.
So, you know what? This is what market brought me here. So, I started posting on LinkedIn since last October. Every day, I was educating clinics and I was not focusing on med spa at that time. For next 3 months, I started posting on how you should be controlling your expenses and what's the best way to get loan. 90% of my messages was coming from med spas. So, it gave me a
Wow.
clear direction that they needed more than maybe anything.
You know what? That's a brilliant answer. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you there, but I think it's good. Two things that you said, it's really important to emphasize. So I'm just going to pause for a moment and emphasize because, as somebody who's running a business for many years, I've run into a number of challenges, and some I've anticipated and most of them I did not. But a couple of things you stayed there just for the benefit of our audience, right? One is not manufacturing a problem, organically stumbling into an issue and wanting to address this issue as step number one. You're like, what? You worked with masseurs and they had issues, and you're like, what? They have a problem. Why don't I help them solve that problem? Number two is how, the focus on the vertical versus the horizontal, right? Because I've been guilty of doing something on the other side. Over the course of the life of our company, Snowpal as a product company, we try to take a specific problem, and then we get overexcited because we are engineers at the end of the day, and we want to build products, and we generalize the problem to the extent that we've sometimes lost focus on the core problem before we've adjusted, done course correction, if you know what I mean, right? We take an issue, we are focused on solving that problem, and then we are like, how do we productize this problem? And the problem starts to become more and more generic, and suddenly, as opposed to solving the hunger of two people who were hungry and we spotted the hunger, we've now started to build a product to solve the hunger of the entire city, which becomes a whole lot more difficult for a company. I don't know, I'm just sharing my 2 cents, and what are your thoughts on something like that?
So, that was, I believe it's extremely hard to give food to the whole city. It's easier for you to start giving food to a small group of people. And I'm so glad that since last 2 months, the market is showing me the way. So in December, just before the Christmas, I got two messages and they were identical. Even though they were two businesses situated in two different cities, they both were med spa. They both were just started and they were wanted to have loan for a new equipment. And so I said, that's it. If I will be able to capture this market the best way I can, I will see myself as a successful entrepreneur.
I love your approach so far to the business, and I've already there's a few learnings for me here because I'll give you a quick background at some point, perhaps during the call, to how our business came into being. But I think it's very good to learn this. Okay, awesome. Now, going to one of the things you said earlier, you sort of drew a parallel to being a user interface designer, right? You said you're doing that for about a decade, and then you had some learnings from there. Let me play the devil's advocate here, right? And humor me for a second. What is the similarity between designing user interfaces and running a business for med spas? To me, they are like two different things altogether. It's almost like apples and oranges. I'm saying that because of mostly my ignorance, if more than anything else. But you drew a parallel. You said there were some learnings. What were those learnings?
So, you're not too wrong. I was expecting that if I solve the user experience problem, I will be a successful entrepreneur. But then I came to know after running a business for more than 6 months now that I was just touching the tip of a iceberg. So, yes, there are parallels. For example, being a designer, it helps me to empathize, focusing on the problem. There are a few techniques like creating user journey map and a pinpoint where the problem's coming. But when it comes to now, you have to develop a product. Now you have to iterate with the users. Now you have to the marketing. Marketing, I would say, was the biggest aspect that I underestimated. Give you a funny
I would
example.
say, I'm going to say join the club because when we started the company, Sharmeen, we thought engineering would be the most difficult problem, right? I mean, we are all a bunch of engineers. We're like, you know what, we're going to run into technical issues and that's all we're going to run into. I mean, we sure do all the time, right? Technology is not easy by any stretch of the imagination. It changes at a rapid pace, even before the advent of AI. But we were at least reasonably prepared as engineers with experience in solving those problems. What we did not expect was things that we had no clue about, right? Like sales, for instance. You mentioned marketing. I'm just going to add sales into the mix. We underestimated or not even estimated the complexity that sales would bring to the table. So that's our experience. I want to ask you, okay, so I will take UI design. Like you said, it's tip of the iceberg. You were in a certain field. Every experience helps. I don't personally think, in my opinion, that it is any more relevant to med spas and running that than being a developer would have been, right? If Sharmeen had been a UI or a UX or a backend developer, Sharmeen would have come to this business with some experience, a lot of rich experience. That would be not particularly any different from your UI experience, at least the way I see it, right? You've learned some things, you've learned a bunch of things, and you're taking those learnings, but I don't necessarily see a parallel between UI and the business per se, and that makes it all the more challenging. Now, tell me, you said a number of things that, what are some of the things that what are some of the initial things that you were like super shocked and surprised by thinking, you know what, I thought I had an idea, but I am clueless here. What would some of those things have been?
So the number one thing was I was expecting if I create a streamlined process of an application, I will earn the trust from the borrowers because they don't have to go to five different lenders. All they have to do is to apply just one application, they will be matched. It seems logical, it seems attractive, but in real life, building a trust is not through an streamlined application. Building the trust was from other areas that I would say someone who had always been working in a company might not have explored. Is the communication, how you're going to, like, regularly I started posting on LinkedIn whatever I was learning from the med spas. I started posting them what are the problems and everything. And I came to know when I started communicating with my potential clients is that they don't care about the streamline application. All they care about how to apply. Am I eligible today? What kind of loan is going to be suitable for me? And the moment she got those responses, she said, I don't care if it's streamlined or not. I have few hours to apply. So that this is
Wow,
what I was.
I'm actually very impressed. I'll be honest with you. Your approach to business so far, even in the first 15 minutes or I don't know, 20 minutes of you sharing it, has been super impressive. Super impressive for many reasons, but one primary reason, Sharmeen, because it is very different from my approach, which was very engineering oriented, right? Not building software, building more and more software. And at some point, people are like, you know what, Krish, there's a lot of software you guys have built. Maybe you need to shift focus to selling a lot of that software and maybe take a break from building it. And as engineers, Sharmeen, it is very difficult for us, and it is still difficult. Every time we take a break from building to selling, we feel like we're wasting time, but that's not true, right? What is the point in building if you're not able to actually close that sale, which is the bigger of the one of the biggest challenges, if not the biggest one. Okay, so now I get an idea. You go post on LinkedIn. There are some of the platforms that you use to sort of find your clients. How did you? Okay, I have to come to your business and the technology. We'll come to it shortly. But now we've dug deeper. Now that I know more about you and your business, how did you start socializing it? Two very high level questions. You identified a problem. You know your clientele, potential clients, right? You want to establish product market fit. You're trying to a business, build software, trying to stand up your application and whatnot. One set of challenges. The other set of challenges is validating the problem in itself, being able to onboard clients on both sides, right? The lenders on one side and the businesses, med clinics on the other side who want to borrow money. To me, I see them as two separate problems, right? One is building your software, the application, its dependencies, credibility, yada, yada, yada. The other thing is bringing people, onboarding two sets of people, right? The clients and the providers, the lenders onto your platform. Before you answer how you went about each of these, am I missing anything here, Sharmeen? Is there like a third leg that I'm missing, or are these the two broad categories?
No, those are the two. You beautifully defined those two categories. So if I say it again, I have on one hand two-sided network, borrowers and lenders, and on the other hand, I have this product that I'm building and creating for.
Okay, great. Now tell me how you went about it and how was your process? In other words, did you go about doing each of those at the same time? Or did you do one, a little bit of something, one of those, and then went to the other and then came back? Or maybe you have more people in the team where each of you focuses on it. How did you go about doing this? Because it's very interesting, not just for me, for our business listeners to understand how a business owner goes about building not just software, but building business essentially.
So, typically, as I said, I had no idea that building trust is going to be the most difficult thing of building this business. Like many other entrepreneurs, I started building the product. And I was, even though I was doing the hardest part of the product, it felt easier than going out and market it. So started doing the product. I was in a honeymoon period of, okay, this is what I'm building, I'm solving the problem. On the other hand, I was interviewing, etc. But I started looking after a few months down. I said, okay, I have a fabulous product, but nobody is even visiting my website. I have, my only clients are those who I got from references that I exist. And so while when I did my business plan, I thought that I'm going to get clients from the different coast of Canada, from US, but nobody's coming. And then I came to know that there is this other aspect of building this network of borrower and lenders. So it came up with, so I started working with, to create my partnerships with lenders. And fortunately, it was way easier than creating the network of the borrower. I contacted number of lenders, and when they saw my product and what I was offering, they came on board, and quickly I got a network of lenders. But it was so much difficult towards the
Okay,
other
no.
side of the.
Okay, that's good. You said, but I'm gonna dissect that little by little, right? Just so we don't miss as much as we don't need to here. So you're starting to build this. You have an idea. You're solving this problem. Let's talk technology for a little bit, right? I think it's maybe the next 5 minutes or so. We'll talk a little bit of technology. So you are a UI designer. So you know how to build user interfaces. You designed user interfaces, and you have a team that you worked with in your previous jobs where they implemented it. I've been in the business of building software for, I mean, all my life. So I understand the roles. The roles keep changing, but I do understand the role that you're actually coming from. Now, taking that role, Sharmeen, you that's one little piece of the puzzle, right? Even if you have an engineering team, you have UI. I mean, I'm saying not every startup can afford all of these rules. Like in our case, we have engineers who do 10 other roles, right? Or 10 roles at the same time. I mean, like how a typical startup works. But regardless, there are those roles. You have a UI, UX designer. You have somebody who's taking those designs and implementing it. You have somebody who's architecting this application. You have somebody who's doing maybe stuff on the back end. Maybe you have full stack developers. You have to choose technologies, potential libraries and frameworks and whatnot. Maybe you have a persistence layer, databases, and how you need to use it. You need to determine how your deployment process is going to look like, which hyperscaler, which cloud platform you're potentially using, is AWS or Google Cloud or Azure. I'm sure I missed, and you need some testing, a fair bit of testing that needs to happen along the way. You need to have these releases defined, how quick you're going to release something to the market, how not so perfect it's going to be, how just good enough is okay, and you don't need to wait for perfecting it because it's going to take a whole lot longer. So these are a number of things that have to come into play, right? UI is one piece of this puzzle. I said something for the last 60 seconds. UI is probably three of those 60 seconds, correct? Now, how did you go fill the other 57 seconds? If you could just walk us through your experience, your challenges, what came naturally to you, and what you had to work towards to making sure all of these came into place.
So there are few things here. First of all, the process that you said, it's a typical process for the SaaS product. Whenever I had been working with a company, we had to go through to all the whole processes, and then we had a release after this QA. In my area, I created the prototypes. Yes, there is a UX before interviews and understand the problem, create prototypes, and then directly jump in to working with my software engineers to produce those prototypes. And I just simply create a small product management Kanban, that this is what we are doing, this is what we are done. We had no testers, we had no release date, we had only one release date, that if the borrower will be able to submit the application, that's done. If the borrower is able if we are able to match borrower with multiple lenders, okay, it's done. So it was not formally that we are releasing this V1 V2. We are just working V2 V1 all together at the same time. But
Okay.
I want to say here is that after some time, when I did not have enough clients and my cost of building was getting higher, I realized that instead of focusing building the product, I must create the network first. Because my minimum product, which is still, if you do go to my borrower portal, it's still black and white. And for a UI designer, you say that you are the UI designer, why you have this unfinished product? It's because today is sufficient to prove that yes, the system is working with the user. And so while in the beginning my whole focus was towards this building the software, it gradually shifted to building my network of borrowers. There are enough people who are coming to me, trusting me. And then, and you won't believe, I have this sophisticated solution of automatically matching borrowers with the lenders. What they were doing, my borrower, is that they were simply sending me an email, uploading their BRPNL statement, and then asking me what is the interest rate, the old way. And so this is where I realized that maybe I should be focusing on understanding them first rather than building the software.
I think that's a great example you gave right there. So let me ask you, if you want to do a demo of your product towards the end of the call, it's left to you, right? I mean, I'm more than happy to have you just show us your product. But let me go back to some of my earlier questions. I got the sense of how you went about this, but I want to dig a little bit deeper, if you will. Right, so you created the basic requirements. You probably stuck them somewhere, and you have worked with engineers to build this. When was your first launch date? I mean, the very first version that went out, not alpha, not beta, but to public, right, where people could actually consume it. So we are recording this podcast in January of 2026, right? When did you launch your product?
Okay. You know what? I should have wrote down the date because
Okay,
I had been building everything all together, and I don't
roughly,
I
just
think
ballpark, just ballpark. Was it 6 months ago, a year ago?
no, it was, I believe, 4 months ago. It
Wow,
was
you're brand
around.
new. Okay, it's
Yeah,
pretty
yeah.
okay,
I
which is good,
started.
right? Okay, sorry. No, I'm going to take that, right? 4 months ago, right? Now, let's say, which is you. The only reason I asked that question, Sharmeen, is, we launched our first product like 5 years ago, and then we've launched more of our products along the way. And things change all the time in technology, right? I mean, they change a whole lot. They change pretty quickly. But in the last couple of years, they've just gone to a different pace of what they're changing given AI and the impact of AI. But now that you are a new business owner who's actually launched this platform, smack in the middle of everything that's happening in the space of AI, here is my very basic question. I've asked this question to a lot of the people who hopped on the platform, and I ask this of myself all the time, but you are a great candidate to ask this question, right? How much code in your first version that was launched 4 months ago, right? I'm just going to ballpark this. Let's say you have 1,000 lines of code in your, just a simple number, right? How much of that code was handwritten by a human versus being generated by tools?
I don't think so. There's any line of code which was written by the human. Um,
Wow. So that's a great
yeah.
starting point, right? Amazing. So go, please.
You know what? This is the biggest difference I found with the because my software engineers, they are still in their school. Most of them are in the third year of software engineering, and
So they are
they are.
students. Hang on. You're saying your developers are students, basically.
Yes, yes. And I was
Okay.
so surprised when I built the whole workflow, and I calculated the hours, that how much time it will take. They did not take even half of the time I estimated of building the product. It's because they are not the vibe coders, they are software engineers, but they are learning with the AI. And I don't think so they're writing anything by themselves. They are writing them with the AI
You know what,
all along
Sharmeen?
the way.
I'm going to stop you there because I don't know what my reaction even should be here, but I'm going to pause you, right? I'm going to pause you. This is an amazing thing that you mentioned here because a lot of the people I've spoken to on the podcast are much like myself who've built this maybe a year, maybe a few years ago, and they're making adjustments, accommodations, and the new tools they're building, they're using AI. Plus, a lot of the people I speak to also, Sharmeen, are people who have been in the business of building software for like decades or years on an average, right? I have people who are fairly new as well. So this answer from you is very fresh, refreshing to me for more than one reason, which is your business is new, right? It's only 4 months old, and your developers are actually students, right? And I'm going to pause here for a second just to digest this and reflect upon it, and just give me a couple of minutes because I have to digest this. Because I'm looking at this camera and I'm talking to people like myself, right? I'm looking at myself and I'm also looking at people like me who've been in the business of building software for decades. Here is a point of inflection, right? Because I speak to developers and architects and directors and VPs and founders and people from all walks of engineering life. And I break it into three parts. And I've said this in a couple of other podcasts before, but I'll say this again. Folks who've done this for 5 decades who are almost ready to retire, right? Or maybe have just retired perhaps. They're looking at AI and everything that's happening like, you know what, that's pretty cool. But I'm not really, I've retired, right? I'm done. So I'm curious to know what's going on, but it doesn't bother me. It doesn't affect me directly, at least, right? Because I'm done with my career. There's the middle people in the middle like me who've done this for 2 decades, and we have more decades to go because you can't retire anytime soon, given where the world is going. So we have to unlearn a lot of what we've learned and relearn some things, a number of things, right? So we do things differently from how we've done it in the past. That's not easy, right? It's pretty challenging because you've got to change your muscle memory and do things very differently. And now the other side, the third category is the other people you're mentioning, folks who've never done this any other way but the way they are trying to do right now. So if I told them, you know what, go back and do it the old fashioned way, and by old fashioned, I mean from 12 months ago, they'll be like, Krish, have you lost your mind? Why would I do it like that, right? So you're talking about a business that's in that first category, correct? And that's a very interesting space that I want to learn more about. So you said you went to developers. I'm going to pause for a second. Does what I'm rambling here make sense to you, Sharmeen, by the way?
This was shocking for me as well, and this is where I saw the contrast of people who has to unlearn the way they used to work with codes, and the generation who are starting with AI, their whole career starting with the AI. And I completely align with you. It was because me myself also been in with the developers who used to code by themselves. So yeah.
So my question here to you, right? So we're going to, there's a number of things I want to ask you here, right? The first question is, why did Sharmeen even have to look for a couple of students who are in college and doing this? Why couldn't Sharmeen be that developer or those developers who actually went about and doing this herself as opposed to looking for help?
So this is also something I spoke to the CTO of my company that I really, really admire. Nearly towards the beginning, I shared my workflows and everything that I was building to this guy. And he is more falls into the third category, the one who are now in the retirement stage. And I wanted to pick his mind that why do you think that 6 months ago vibe coding was so much in talking and everyone was talking about it, and I wanted to pick his mind that is this thing can be built through vibe coding. And this is where what he said, that the best way to start something is to start with either contractors or maybe students. Maybe hiring a mature developer, senior developer, is going to be too costly, and what I want to build today, maybe we can do it with a developer, with a junior developer, but doing it by yourself, it's riskier than you think, because it's not a web
Okay,
page, it's a whole software.
correct. But let me ask you. You said you were a UI designer, right? Not a UI developer, but a UI designer.
Yes.
Okay, so but I get that part, but I want to, if you, I mean, to the extent you want to answer this question, I leave it to you. I know you were not a developer in your past life, correct? But you were in the space of engineering. You understood how things worked. You worked with engineers, so you've seen code, even if you've not been a coder yourself. And now we have a lot of these tools. What were one or two things? And I ask you, I'll tell you why I'm asking this question. Uh, Either now or I can tell you afterwards. But I have a reason behind asking this as to why did Sharmi not roll up her sleeves and say, you know what? There's vibe coding, there's Claude code generation, there's Copilot, there's a number of tools available. Why do I even need anybody else? Why not me? Were there one or two reasons that precluded you from not taking that approach?
It's the number one reason is that I overestimated the number of clients I will have per month. I was 90% wrong. I was getting less than 10% what I expected. And the biggest reason is because I was not communicating enough about my company. And so I had a choice. Either I was working with the marketing company or I was working with the developer. And so I believe that the marketing company is more like, it's my personal opinion, at the beginning of when you're founding your company, you're dumping money if you work with the marketing, while if you invest the same money towards the developer, you are building something, you're building something core. So I took this decision to, instead of working with a marketing company, I will invest my time to see how those posting works, how to improve the SEO. Now the new thing is engineering, sorry, AEO, I don't know exactly what stand for, but understanding more those area than doing engineering. So I hired engineer because I wanted to invest my time towards the other area of building my company, not towards the development.
Oh my God, you're a beautifully brilliant entrepreneur. I'm very impressed by the whole approach, and it's a very a revelation of some sort, and very refreshing as well, because the way we're building businesses is changing entirely, right? What I mean by that is you're not worried about necessarily, and here is two sides to it, right? See, if you're an engineering founder, right? Some of us as developers who become founders, it becomes a double-edged sword. And here's what I mean. On one side, we don't need to depend on other people to help us build what we want to build, right? Even with or without AI, we can still get stuff done. So that's a positive. But the negative is, the other side of that sword is, we focus more and more on engineering problems, Sharmeen, than on business problems. Like you said, right? The important thing is you're solving a core business problem. Engineering and the tools you're building are helping solve that problem essentially, right? But the problem is more important in many ways than the solution you're building to solving that problem. As engineering founders, not just me, right? I've talked to a number of people where we are so engrossed in building software, we sometimes forget what we are building the software for or who we are building this for, because we are more excited about the code, the process, the deployment, and yada, 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 that we forgot what the heck we started doing this thing for. But as a non engineering founder, there is this luxury of being able to do it. Now, okay, I think you said you thought there was going to be a lot more clients initially, so your focus you may not have had enough time to build the software, so you have to rely on some other people to building the software. That's great. Now my second question is, how did you arrive at the technology stack of the tool that you're building? And it can be one of two things or somewhere in between. One is you're like, you know what, I've been working with this team in the past, they've used these kinds of languages and libraries and frameworks, so I understand them to some extent. So I would rather my business use those technologies. So can you folks who are helping me in college use whatever methodologies to generate code, but generate code in languages that I'm reasonably accustomed to? Or did you go find these people saying, you know what, I could care less? It could be Python, it could be, I don't know, React, it could be whatever else it needs to be on the UI side. The backend could be Ruby or Java or Node.js or, you know what, Golang. I really could care less. Give me something that works. Give me something that looks the way I want for it to look. Was it one or the other or somewhere in between?
Somewhere in between.
Okay.
So being in the engineering team for a long time, I had my bias, as you said, Python, React, Angular. I personally did not want to go to something extremely specialized, something extremely rare, and give the wild card to students that you choose whatever you like, because something extremely standard, I know that if it exists today, there's a high chance it will exist tomorrow as well. While if we go something very special, we don't know if we want to elaborate more in it. So yes, I had my biases towards that. Okay, Python, and I was always asking that what language you were using, without imposing them that you have to choose React over Angular. So yeah, if they haven't chosen either of it, I'm good. But if they're coming up with a third option, I have to go to it, that what
So in
is it
other
all
words,
about.
does that mean you wanted to have some familiarity with the tools that they were picking? Is that what you're saying there, right?
I won't say familiarity, in not in terms of coding, because I never coded myself, but having worked in the companies wherever we chose something extremely specific, we had a hard time to scale it. So
Okay.
I wanted something to be extremely common for every other developer. So if someone is quitting the job, anyone else can pick it up. It was more in that sense that I wanted something to be
Okay, you
extremely
said scale there, but I want to make sure I understood correctly. You don't mean scale in terms of you being able to cater to 10, 100,000, a million, 10 million users, right? You're talking scale more in the context of, can I scale these technologies so I can find other developers if these ones were to leave my team, right? You're talking scalability in that sense, correct?
Yes, I'm talking in that sense.
Okay, that is a very good way to approach the problem too, because uh, what if you picked one that's super cool and then 3 months later those people left and you're like, you know what, I don't know how to do this thing. So let me ask you a parallel question. When you found the people to help you, what were maybe the top three things you were looking for, right? What were the top three things you were looking for, either what we're looking to avoid or looking to get from the people, so you know this is the team that can help?
So there were two major things that I was looking for. Number one is being expert on something that I am not. So I know that I'm
But
not
hang
expert
on,
in.
Sharmeen, sorry to interrupt you. You are looking for students who haven't finished their undergrad yet, but you also mentioned the word experts. So I want to make sure I understand what it means. What do you mean by experts? But we're talking about students here.
When I say students, is they are third year in student of Toronto University of software engineering. They are, from, even though they're students in third year, they are 100 times better than I am in the development. So we have, yes, we can say expert. They are not
So
they
okay,
don't have 10
so
years of.
you wanted somebody who had done that for a little bit of time, right? Let's say more than experts. You wanted someone who had used those technologies for maybe a fair bit of time, correct? That's what we are saying.
Yeah, or if I rephrase it correctly, I wanted someone who is better than myself. Yes, expert, we can debate on the word what expert is in this context, but someone who is learning, who is focusing on this particular field. So for example, I couldn't have hired someone who had been handling marketing plus development plus this and this. I wanted software developer who is learning Python in his course. So I will be hiring this person, not the person who has been learning three different things altogether. So
Okay.
being extremely focused on one thing that I'm not sure I'm good at.
Okay, that's one. You said two things. What is the other thing?
The other thing is the motivation. So when I hired multiple students, I saw one or two start dropping the ball, and this is where I saw the role of the motivation. There was a guy, he was not as good as others, but I saw that that guy was ready to work 4 a.m. in the morning just to get things done. And so I would say that more than the first thing, if I need to hire again, I'll be more focusing on the second quality, which is the motivation, the willing to finish something that started. Then yes, I'm really good at that and I can do it. And then after, you know what,
I
maybe
think
I'm not interested.
attitude. So attitude is key, right? I mean, being passionate in whatever it is that you do is going to take you a long distance, correct? It's just the way life works, correct? You cannot be doing it. I mean, we all need to get paid. Ultimately, you got to pay your bills and keep your lights on. But wanting to do something and wanting to do that a whole lot makes all of the difference, right? So, good attitude, a nice personality who's actually encouraged and excited about getting stuff done, and somebody who had actually been working in that the technologies you were sort of looking for are a couple of things that you look for. Okay, let me ask you more things there. Now, these are students who have other engagements, sorry, other commitments, right? At school, classes, credits, and yeah, number of other things. So they are part timers, correct? Now, there is this big debate between doing things full time versus doing things part time. And I can speak for myself. Before we launched our first product 5 years ago, Sharmeen, I had done this part time, right? Meaning I can't remember the last time I actually went on vacation, but I've been doing this forever. So, but it was part time, meaning Snowpal was second priority to everything else I was committing to my clients, right? Anything I worked for my clients from a managed services standpoint was priority number one. So while we continuously got things done, we never went live. I don't know why. Things happened all the time, but we never went live. So at one point, I said, you know what? Snowpal is my number one priority, right? It's my only priority. So I'm going to quit what I'm doing and do this full time. And then we went live in like 8 months or so, right? That's speaking as a founder, essentially. Now, while somebody's not a founder, maybe the part time engagement can potentially work. But I want to get your thoughts on how challenging is it generally to work with people who are not doing this 40 hours a week, right? They have other commitments, other school engagements, and whatnot. Was that a risk that you were willing to take because maybe they were more affordable from a hiring standpoint? But and what were some of the challenges you ran into in that engagement?
You really came up with something that many entrepreneurs like me who hired students suffer, is their other engagements. I cannot say that in future if I have to restart this journey I will not hire a student, but I must say that it's extremely critical that you understand it should be one of their priorities. It shouldn't be their side project that they do it whenever they have time. And this is where my struggle was, is I can understand that for a third year engineering student they have to pass their exams, and being prepared for the exams is their number one priority. So managing those critical time while executing my project as well had been extremely challenging.
I can imagine. And then these developers you're talking about, are they based out of Canada?
Yes, one in
Okay.
Canada, one is outside in Canada.
Okay, cool. And then when you're looking for, so let's talk a little bit about maybe a little bit more about technology, right? So let's say they came up with an architect. Let's say even if you're generating code, and I'm curious to know about this because while you don't want to over-engineer the problem because you don't know whether you're going to have one client or a million clients. Sometimes as engineers, we try to solve world hunger, like I said earlier. We try to build a system that's so beautifully robust, but there's nobody onboarding that system, and who cares how many people can onboard and it can scale from a technology standpoint because you really don't have that many people onboarding, right? So how do you determine, like, you how did you have them determine the architecture of this application? Was it more like, hey, give me something that works, I don't care to know the details of the architecture, or were you actually curious about how it took shape, the product?
On first thing was I spoke to my friend, my ex colleague, my boss, that look, this is what I'm going to build, and I need your help because I'm not a technical person, and I want someone who's going to look at the code and can criticize this. So I had someone who was watching what's going on. That being said, I give the full authority to the developers, giving them that you're going to use those languages if you can. You create the architecture and do it. I also assume that there might be a time that I have to rewrite the code completely if I need to scale my product for 1,000 to 1 million users. I need to maybe just wash out whatever they have done. But that was the path that I chose to take. Either I give from the beginning an architecture which can be scaled. In that case, what I have learned is that you need to have a senior developer. You cannot assume that a junior developer or a student can create an architecture. Maybe they can, but your expectation is extremely high. So my first thing, I wanted that let's build it. It should be functional, it should be minimum scalable, that it can be used for 10, so it should be at least 100 to 1000 or maybe 10,000 years can use it, but not beyond it.
Okay. And how much of what you've done so far would you say could have been done if AI and code generation were not to be in the mix of things? Let's say we go back 4 years and Sharmeen had to build this company. The problems were still good at the time, but she had to go the old fashioned way, if you will, of building a business, a software business. How different would it have been? Like, nope, I can't do it, or would it have been difficult and you'd still gone ahead and done it?
I would have raised a lot of money to get these things done. These So giving you an example, recently I was speaking to a developer, and I showed them that these are the things that needs to be built. In my assumption, it was taking 400 hours to build it. But I haven't told the student that what's my assumption. The student said that it can be done in 60 to 100 hours. And I said, okay, can you do that? I said, yeah,
Hang on, hang
I'm
on.
confident.
You thought your estimate was 400 and theirs was 60 to 100, meaning 15 times the estimate that you had essentially.
Exactly. And this is where I saw the biggest role of AI, is that they are not the one who writing. They know exactly what's going on, but they are not the one who's writing the code. Well, of course they are writing the code, but the fast iteration they are having with the AI, it's unbelievably, you cannot compare it the way we used to do it 4 or 5 years ago. So I could have done the same thing with way more capital injecting in my hiring of developers
Okay,
than
so
today.
now the question to you, Sharmeen, is people watching this, right? They come from most of our audience is in the US and in Europe, some in Asia as well, but across a variety of a range of demographics, if you will. So a lot of the people are like me as well, right? Who've been either they're business owners or maybe people who are still working for another company and building software. So hearing everything that you say, some of us are going to freak out, right? I mean, even though we know, right? We know a lot of this. We're going to be like, oh my God, Hermine's a business owner. She went ahead and built a business to solving real problems that exist out there in the world. It's not manufactured problems by any stretch of the imagination. And she's actually building software. And she didn't care to hire developers who've been in the business of building software for years. And she could actually go to students who yet to get this first diploma and getting on. Not that I've had my thoughts and opinions about should you even be in college in 2026, but that's for another day. But they have not graduated yet. So my question to you, I'm going to put it as raw as I can, right? Krish is a developer, let's say, right, who's been doing this for 20 years. Sharmeen's trying to work on building this business. She looked up Krish's profile. Yeah, looks like he's done a bunch of these things. Would you want to? Is there any reason to hire Krish anymore?
You know what? As I told you, the biggest, I will still hire Krish because I know I am still at the early stage of my company. When I need to build a solid architecture behind my code, when I'm looking at to scale it, my software is going to be, for example, B2C. It's going to, there will be a billion user or hundreds of millions of users. I cannot rely on a software student to build this software. Those expertise can only become, in my opinion, through experience, through have been through so many different cycles of development. It's not just learning how to write a code, it's also that how you failed and then get back again, and then failed again and then get back again. So there will be no AI which will reverse this experience that
Okay,
your
so
generation or the
what you're saying, Sharmeen, is Krish doesn't have to switch his career, not yet, right? I don't need to switch my career, not yet.
You know what, if I have enough capital, I would have hired Krish than software
No,
engineers.
I think your answers are spot. I think it's very important for people to know because we are now in the business of solving problems in the world, and we can solve problems in much quicker time, right? So your answers are absolutely invaluable because they are real life experience, right? It's not coming from school or college. It's coming from people, a person who's actually done it. This has been phenomenal. Are you able to share some of your stack with our audience? Because a lot of us are developers and we are curious about how it is being built. So, are you able to share some of what you've used in terms of technologies to getting your product up and running?
So what do you mean, should I share my screen or?
Oh no, not you can do a demo, but I'm just saying what are some languages that you're using, some frameworks or let me start with the basic, right? Are you deploying your systems on, let's say, AWS, Google Cloud, Azure, or some other scalar, hyperscaler?
So I wanted to deploy my solution to AWS, etc., and I came to know that it's too advanced for me. I started working with small hosting platforms. You might have not even heard about it. It's Vercel VO.
Oh yeah,
So
is
yeah,
that is it not? I know Versal. So are you using Next.js by any chance?
I'm not sure. I don't think so.
Okay. Yeah, Favid. Okay, I see which one you're talking about, right? Now let's say let's get to a little bit of the technology to the extent you want to do this, right? Because it's very curious. A lot of our audience is going to be curious. So let's say your developers are building software, they're giving it to you. Here is my assumption, and correct me where I'm wrong. You're going to be like, Krish, you're in third year in college, you get this stuff done, give it to me. So I'm going to go do this. You're going to give me a deadline. I'm going to work towards a deadline. Maybe in a week's time, I come back to you. Couple of very specific questions. Do you look for that developer to give you iterative solutions, or do you give them the whole time for them to get everything that you want to get done there with that task? In other words, do you break the tasks down to the necessary minimum and only look back on what the developer has provided to you at the end of that task? Or do you give a broader task and have them iteratively reach out to you and say, I'm making progress and we are moving along?
So I give them the bigger task, and iteratively they come to me and show that this is what is done. So giving you one example, this morning there is one student who were leaving the project because now she got a full time job somewhere. She was now giving me, it's not a half finished software, but she was now giving me that, okay, this is the whole stack is. It's all built in Vercel. You have to now continue using Visual Studio Code that I'm aware of because I was using it, and use some AI to finish it. So unfortunately now I have to do a little bit of coding so to finish the project, because as much as I want that it would be done by all my developers, it's not always possible. So I myself start putting in a little bit of coding to finish things
Okay.
that they were unable to finish.
Great answer, right? Next question is, how do you judge the quality of what your team is producing and giving? In other words, it'll work, right? In other words, a college project typically is something that works, but nobody cares how it got to work. The big difference between college and the real life, in my opinion, is when I was in college, I built a fair bit of software. Everything worked to the extent that it was supposed to work, or at least claim to work, I should say. But I only learned that it's not good enough if it works. It needs to work in certain ways, forms, and shapes after I went to work, right? So now Krish is this college student who's giving you this working piece of software. How does Sharmeen trust that I mean, you can test it. Yeah, it works, you can tell. But what gives you the confidence that it is as good as it needs to be? I'm not saying it needs to be perfect, right? I'm just saying whatever your standard of goodness is, how do you tell that it has met that standard that you've set for yourself and your company?
So my I have two priorities. Number one is it must the borrower who are applying, all their criterias are all synchronized with one another. So if we have a final answer, it is very well calculated. So last week I was getting bugs like, for example, one borrower, he was putting 10K and it started coming up 20K. I said, there is some, we have to fix it. So it should be functional. If it shouldn't, it's not functional, for me it's no go. I sorry, I have the kids
No
coming
worries.
on.
Hello.
So, as I'm telling you, I'm still at the early stage of this business. So, my requirement for being functional is extremely minimum. My focus is I need to build my network and my product little by little. Because if I start focusing more on my product and less on my network, this wouldn't work. So, a minimum functional software is good enough for me.
Okay, perfect. Right, that makes sense. I think we are at the tail end. I know you have your kid there as well. So, what do you have any? Do you want to share your product? What we can wrap this up, however you want to wrap this up, Sharmeen. I'm going to let you ask me questions if you have any questions to ask me. But did you want to share your platform with our audience? You are welcome to do it. But if you don't want to do it, that's fine as well. I'm going to include the link to your product so people can definitely check it out. Yeah.
Yeah, so I have hundreds of tabs open in my, so I want to skip showing my product, but my platform is now accessible through the URL, the www.livora.com. In next few days, I'm launching another part of my product, which is the borrower readiness portal. This portal helps the borrower to calculate if they are ready to get the loans. This is something very innovative that we have done so far. We haven't done seen anything near that our competitors has done. So in few days we are going to launch it through our website as well. So yeah, excited this, and you can just go to my website or my LinkedIn to see my products and where I'm going to.
Well, good luck with the update coming up shortly. We look forward to that. So before we wrap this up, one non-technical question. But before that, any questions you want to ask me?
You had a fabulous experience for last 5 years. What is one thing you said that the entrepreneurs should be looking at when they're starting up like me?
I think the first thing, as soon as you can look for product market fit, that has been a continuous learning for us because we run into an issue, we try to build a solution for that issue, which is fine, but being in touch with the product market fit and what the market requires from you and how that continues to change, that remains a challenge. It's an evolving challenge for us, right? Because we identify a problem, we solve the problem, but then you figure, okay, the problem is much bigger than we may have thought, and maybe we are well equipped to solving that problem, or maybe we are not because we are not big enough to addressing all parts of the problem. So, is it good enough to address one part of the problem? Does the market receive that in a positive way, or is there only value only if you address the problem in entirety, right? In other words, let's say I'm giving you a random example of a restaurant, right? Let's say I open a restaurant and I want to serve food. I might, if I did not call it a soup place and I call it a place for dinner, people are coming in expecting soup, appetizer, entree, dessert, and the whole nine yards, right? But let's say the company is not big enough to provide all parts of the meal, and we can only provide soup. You enter the business, but you're not going to be happy because you came in wanting entree, dessert, and a drink or whatnot, right? So I don't know whether it's a reasonable example, I think, but you have to extrapolate that to a software business. If you can address all problems, and if the business only makes sense if all problems were addressed, then you have to look at it more carefully. But if you can break the problems down into smaller pieces, and if you think it can still actually solve meaningful problems, even if you did not solve the problems in entirety, then I think it's a little more positive for a startup because you probably won't have the money or the time or the resources or anything to do everything you want to do. So at least the parts that you can possibly do, you want to be well equipped to doing that. At least that's been one of my learnings along the way, if that makes sense.
That's very interesting. Thank you so much for sharing your perspective.
Yep, no problem. And then my last non-technical question to you, Sharmeen, is what's your comfort dish, your favorite dish? If someone woke you up in the middle of the night and you want to eat that, what would that dish be?
Okay. I would say it's biryani.
Okay, what biryani? You have to be specific. What biryani?
It should be a chicken biryani.
Okay, and I think I usually have people explain this if it's not. I know what the chicken biryani is, but for people who don't understand, maybe you can give a one-liner description. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a typical dish. We don't know really where it's originated, maybe from Hyderabad in India. It's a marinated rice with Indian spices, with chicken, and it's just a great mix of, if I believe, 27 different spices, which makes it extremely flavorful. And I don't think so anything else matches in terms of taste if I have a biryani with it.
Okay, good to know. I'm vegetarian, but I totally understand and appreciate a biryani. I don't know the origins myself, but I want to say probably from the Mughals. When the Mughals were in India for a long time, I have to believe it came from there. Probably Hyderabad is one of the cities where it's a lot more popular now, but maybe the origin is probably goes hundreds of years behind. Okay, perfect. This was amazing. Anything else you want to say as closing comments before we call it wraps here?
No, I think thank you so much. It was a fantastic time speaking with you. Just from your questions, I learned a lot about this technical, things. I'm gonna have a reflective session just after this call to think about how am I building this project. So, no, and thank you so much for having me.
No worries. If you have any questions, feel free to hit me up. Again, folks, this is Sharmeen Aqeel, who we can tell by this conversation is a phenomenal founder. Definitely, I'm going to include links to Sharmeen's LinkedIn profile and her company Livora, which is a lending platform for med spas and clinics based out of Canada. But as she mentioned, it serves customers in both US and Canada, essentially, right? So I think with that, we're going to call it wraps on this podcast. Thank you so much, Sharmeen. Much appreciate your time today.
Thank you.